3 to 4 hours outside of Addis in a town called Yetabon, which is near Buttigieg.
Okay. What did you and your group do every day at Project Mercy?
We were told we'd be teaching, and that was funny because it was a rather vague instruction, and we had no understanding at that point how many kids we'd be teaching. What we found out after spending the first night was that our numbers were gigantic. We had classrooms with 60 or 70 kids. Of course, we were teaching along with the students on the trip. We were trying to allow the students to do most of the teaching, but of course standing up in front of 70 or 80 kids in that kind of setting was a little bit overwhelming for the kids. So we regrouped rather quickly and put together some lesson plans and had an absolute blast. I mean, that was probably one of the most challenging but one of the most fun aspects of the entire trip. I mean, we were just giggling at the notion that we were going to be in front of all these kids day after day, and we didn't know whether it was going to be 1 day, 2 days, and I think we ended up teaching for 4 or 5 straight days.
Teaching which subjects?
Well, that's an interesting question also. We were trying to teach a sort of range of classes, but ultimately we ended up teaching anything that they could understand. So there was, we were specifically teaching some history and social studies and talking about things like HIV/AIDS but even basic history, geography. What was stunning to us was how much the Ethiopian kids knew in terms of content. But then when you asked us just some of the simplest questions, it was really clear that they had done a lot of rote memorization. But as far as their knowledge of history, I think some of the kids over at Project Mercy knew American history as well as our students did. They knew chemistry, they knew upper level math, but when we got down to talk and to really try to apply knowledge, we realized that was the struggle for the kids. Yeah, and so ultimately we ended up, at Marta and Demi's request, practicing English. I mean, having conversations. Really, one of the things that, again, their ability to memorize was off the charts, but as far as pronunciation, it was, they really loved hearing Americans speak English and trying to imitate that. So we were having as much fun just interacting and talking about our lives, but sharing our stories in English and learning some Amharic from the kids.
What did you do at the hospital, the clinic, with Dr. Hodes?
Yeah, well, actually, there's a hospital at Project Mercy that's not affiliated with Dr. Hodes. The hospital at that stage was just being built. It was a beautiful facility. I mean, absolutely gorgeous. I'll never forget seeing the hand-carved doors to the hospital that were sort of very emblematic of the way Marta goes about her business. Like, everything was absolutely perfect and had to be done that way. And I remember looking up in the waiting area at the roof that had to be torn down once or twice so that it was up to Marta's standards. But I also know at that time they were really struggling to keep doctors and pharmacists because with not much going on in Yetabon, people and Ethiopian doctors in general mostly taking off to the United States, they were having a really hard time getting doctors to practice. But the facility itself was just extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. And your role there at Dr. Hodes' facility?
Well, Dr. Hodes is in Addis. All so right. When really with Dr. Hodes, I think what we were doing more than anything was, and what I think is really at the heart of some of these trips, but particularly the early trips, was getting exposure to everything you could imagine that you might be able to affect or impact as a world citizen, meaning we were visiting NGOs, we went to Mother Teresa's orphanage where Dr. Hodes was working as the chief doctor. We went to other NGOs and even government organizations, but exposing the kids to the broadest range of sort of possibilities, ways in which they might connect whatever they're doing here in the United States, be it as a high school student or as an adult, and how they might apply all that they've been exposed to, or maybe even give of themselves in whatever way they might feel appropriate.
How did it affect you personally?
Oh, it changed my life. I know it sounds like cliche, but as I said, I had been to Africa before and did feel that sort of need to return. But the moment we went on this trip with LearnServe, it felt like we were there not just as tourists, but as both ambassadors, but then as people who would need to fulfill a larger mission. And I must say, I've been back to Ethiopia every year since that initial trip. So it certainly planted a seed and helped connect me, and I think in a way that I can't imagine any other trip or organization could have done, because these connections that we made at Project Mercy and with Dr. Hodes, where I continue to visit both those places every summer still, were cemented with really within minutes of arriving. I think the way that Hugh and Chuck and Jill Rademacher, who was with the Case Foundation, the way they structured that trip for us really connected us in a human way that I don't know how other people could have done.